Hi, guys, and welcome to this broadcast. I'm Pastor Kerry. I am both a pastor and a professional life coach, and also the author of Beyond Betrayal. And we're talking in this we're doing this forgiveness initiative, or forgiveness intensive. And really, what we're trying to do is to help people to know how to forgive. Most people know that they need to forgive, but I think where people get stuck is knowing how to forgive. And that's what we want to talk about in this broadcast. So the journey to freedom that you'll find in forgiveness begins with a choice. In this edition of Beyond Betrayal, Forgiveness Initiative Project, we'll take a closer look at what this means and why it's important. We'll be right back. Okay, I have a guest with me today, and it's Karen. She's been helping me out with this project, and so there she is. And so welcome to the broadcast, Karen. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Good. So what we're talking about here is the steps to forgiveness. And, different authors have come up with different steps to forgiveness. After thinking about this for a long time, I came up with 10 steps. And let me just share with you what those are real quick here. Is that for number one is choose to forgive. Number two is examine yourself. Number three, identify their offenses and your losses. Number four is feel your feelings. Number five is forgive all you can. Number six is share this experience with a trusted friend. And number seven is ask God to help you with what you cannot forgive. And 8 is be patient and give yourself grace. And 9 is realize that forgiveness is a process. And then 10 is hold a resolution ceremony. Now we're going to be going through each one of these steps, and we're going to devote a broadcast to each one of those. And so today we're talking about forgiveness is a choice. Why does that matter?
Well, if you're forced to forgive, how is it genuine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So but I think that sometimes we may feel like we are coerced or forced to forgive from the commands of God.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a
Yeah.
result, that we not only have resentment towards our offenders,
Mm-hmm.
but also towards God. Here's one of the ways that I've
Well,
learned to resolve this stuff. Go ahead, tell me what you were thinking.
okay. Here's a thought: is um, God does command us to forgive, and we're supposed to obey God's commands.
Mm-hmm.
But none of God's commands are done because he's trying to control us or anything like that. It's because he knows what's best for us, and forgiving
Yeah.
is what is best for us. um so that's why it's a command.
Yeah, that's a great insight, and thank you for sharing that perspective. Because I think that when we hear that command, we kind of like maybe get our back up a little bit on that because we feel like we're being controlled by God. But if
Yeah.
we assume that whatever God commands is done from a heart of love,
Hmm.
then He knows that if we don't forgive, that we are going to stay stuck in a place that ultimately is going to harm us.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
that does not mean that we have to rush through forgiveness. I
Hmm.
think that part of the Here's one way that I've learned to think about this is that God is not so concerned with how far you've traveled, but with what direction you're headed.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, and because I mean, for some folks, I, as you have, we have coached people who have had egregious wrongs
Mm-hmm.
perpetrated against them, and so it's really tough, and they feel really stuck, and they really feel angry and embittered and resentful and all of that stuff. But but it's but if they have oriented themselves towards this is what I want, then they're that's all that God wants for us right now. You know,
There
so
aren't really any benefits to not forgiving.
exactly, yeah. That-
So a lot of times for me, I have to think of what's the opposite. So
mhm,
if we're called to forgive, what's the opposite? To hold a
mhm,
grudge, to be bitter, to be resentful, to hate, all those kind of
mhm.
things, and none of it's good.
Yeah, exactly. That the most arresting thing anyone has ever said to me about this, and anybody who's heard my broadcasts before will have heard me mention this, is that once when I was grappling with this topic myself, my wife Janice, she I says, I don't know for sure if we're supposed to forgive everything that anybody does to us. And she said, well, what's your options?
Hmm.
And that just
Yeah.
stopped me dead in my tracks because
Hmm.
there are no good options to
Yeah.
not forgiving.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we do not become better people as a result of it. It will always diminish us as a
Hmm.
person. So
Yeah.
how about with respect to making this choice? And that's what we're talking about here, is that forgiveness is a choice. How does what does this mean for us? Any additional insights you'd like to share with us?
I think one of the things that it means is that you have to trust God. Uh,
Mm-hmm,
as far as um, if you believe that God is good and that He
mm-hmm.
wants good for you, and He knows everything,
Yeah.
then when He says to forgive,
Mm-hmm,
that that you're when you choose to forgive, you're trusting God, that
mm-hmm.
that's the best thing for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Here's another thing that it means is that it means that my offenders or perpetrators are not in charge of my healing, growth, and recovery. I am. So when I
Hmm.
make that choice to forgive, it
Yeah.
breaks um, that trauma bond that
Hmm.
the perpetrators have done against me, and essentially is that your influence. Essentially, what I'm saying to my perpetrator or my offender is that your influence over my life stops here.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to forgive, and you don't have any control over that. You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
one of the things that okay, and let me ask you this question. you know, I know you've told me before. Don't ask me those questions on the spot. But you're smart, and and if you don't have the answer, I'll be your safety net here. Is that
Or I'll just stare blankly like deer in
yeah?
headlights.
Is um, that should we forgive even if um, our offenders are not apologetic or remorseful?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in the Bible that says only forgive if they're remorseful or
Mm-hmm.
apologetic.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
chances are most people who hurt you aren't going to be kind enough to come back and apologize.
Yeah.
Uh, and sometimes the person who hurt you, you don't have contact with, or
They may be dead.
they buy
Mm-hmm.
something. So yeah, um, yeah, it's, I think that's not really a factor that
Mm-hmm.
comes into play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Their um, their apology doesn't have any bearing over your choice to do what's right.
Exactly. Exactly. Because if it does, you're giving away your power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that let me share with you another concept here with respect to why choosing to forgive is so important. And one reason why choosing to forgive is so important, it means that despite my strong emotions, and let's face it, that when we've been profoundly hurt by someone we've trusted or loved, is that that's smarts, and it's really going to affect us deeply. But despite my strong emotions, I don't have to be controlled by those emotions. They will not set the direction for my life. Instead, I choose healing, growth, and recovery. And kind of like one of the requirements to be a part of this Beyond Betrayal project is that you have to be deeply hurt.
Yeah.
You've experienced that on a few occasions in your life, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, as probably some people know my story,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm currently seeing a therapist for the traumas that I'm working through.
Yeah.
And one of the things she says, and this is something that's mentioned in your 10 Steps to Forgiveness video that I watched,
Mm-hmm.
um, is that let's see, I'm moving forward. Not forgiving keeps you stuck and stagnant. And um, and uh, she says depression is an illness of stillness,
Hmm.
and
That's
really,
good.
in order for you to um, get better and move past something, you have to be doing something and moving forward, like you said, as long as you're heading in the
Mm-hmm.
right direction, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So anything you can do to you know make things, improve things and not stay stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. Here are some of the here are some of the strong emotions that follow a hurt and betrayal: resentment, bitterness, anger, hate. And one of the things that I've seen this over and over and over, is that people who kind of come through that experience oftentimes feel empowered by contempt,
Mm-hmm.
contempt for their perpetrators. And
Yeah.
and there's and that also warps us as individuals. And I want to talk more about that in a future broadcast. But
Mm-hmm.
but absolutely, that kind of feeling empowered by contempt for others is always going to trip us up and actually lead us into self-righteousness.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
so so um
Yeah.
so uh, uh, the, we're talking about the choice to forgive.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what's cool about that, is that I can choose to forgive even if my perpetrators remain unapologetic,
Mm-hmm.
and I can choose to forgive even if my emotions are all over the map.
Yeah.
You know, and that
Yeah.
and so we don't have to be controlled by. And that doesn't mean that once we choose to forgive, we don't feel those negative emotions anymore.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but go ahead.
Oh,
No,
one of
you
the things
first.
that I liked in the video too was it said
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness is a decision, not a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, rarely do you feel like forgiving somebody, but you decide to do it even if you don't feel like doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, so so finally, and I want to kind of not linger too long on these steps, but
Hmm.
finally, this choice to forgive means that I have the power to experience the good that God has in store for me beyond betrayal.
Hmm.
I do not have to live as a powerless victim, and I do not have to live as an embittered or defiant survivor.
Hmm.
Boy, that's real power there. How
Yeah.
about you're a student of the scriptures? How about Joseph from the Old
Hmm.
Testament? He was betrayed by his brothers. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused by his master's wife. He ended up in prison. The people that he helped out in prison, that one of the guys says, "Oh, yeah, I'll remember you." And then when he was sprung from prison, Joseph ends up languishing there for some time afterwards. Finally, he has an opportunity where his brothers come before him, and he could have lowered the boom on them, but he doesn't. He kind of
Hmm.
goes through this long, convoluted experience of kind of figuring out whether or not that they are trustworthy or safe.
Yeah.
But then, after dad dies, and so now all the brothers
They're
are
worried that
they're
he's gonna.
worried.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's Joseph's perspective on that?
Yeah. That's one of my favorite verses. And it says, he says, what you intended for evil, God has used for good.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that every Joseph has a perspective of being able to, like, in hindsight is kind of 2020, but every single thing that he looked back on, that his brothers, or anyone for that matter, that they were trying to harm him, God took that and turned it into something good.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that when we're stuck in unforgiveness, that one of the problems that we struggle with is disbelief.
Hmm.
And so what we disbelieve is that God is able to redeem this hurt and this offense that has happened to my life, and He's going to bring something incredibly good. That doesn't mean that what we've gone through warrants, that the treatment we've experienced. But what it does mean is that God doesn't have control over free creatures, but He does have control over outcomes.
Hmm.
And so when we choose to forgive, God is able to bring about positive outcomes in our life that are beyond our comprehension.
Yeah.
But we don't get to see the fruit until we do the work.
Right. Well, yeah, and then there's like even things that say, if you don't forgive, your Father in heaven will not forgive you. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, man, that's not something I want.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, is there anything anything else oh, excuse me, that you'd like to mention before we wrap up here?
Yeah. Well, probably, you know, one of the most encouraging verses to me throughout my trauma and and as I've been healing and stuff, is Romans 8:28, which says, uh, all things work together for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. And I usually, when I say that verse in my head or I write it out or whatever, I add at the end, even this, because it doesn't say some things or a few things or anything. There's no contingency. It says all things work together for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. So God is definitely gonna make something good even out of this.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Karen, you're a remarkable lady. And
Yeah. I had good parenting.
yeah, you know, but but I do appreciate you spending some time with me today. And so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up here right now. Stay online so I'll have a chance to talk with you afterwards. So, but I want to remind you folks that you can find the way forward. We have this program called beyondbetrayal.org. It's a program that, we're continuing to develop. And one of the things that we're working on right now is this forgiveness initiative or forgiveness intensive project. And I trust that you've been blessed by it. And I hope that you'll join us next time for our broadcast that will be coming up. We're going to be trying to do these on Wednesdays or Thursdays. We haven't nailed it down for sure, but we're going to make sure that they get posted in our Facebook group at beyondbetrayal.org. So that's it for now. We'll see you next time. Bye bye.